All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Alistair Spears. This is my colleague, Jeff Medford. We are from the Office 365 deployment team. So we are product managers that have a little bit of a different job. Our job is not really to focus on a feature per se or a product per se, but what we consider a bug. And that is the fact that deployment is really, really hard. Deployment, constantly, every release, we aim to make deployment easier and easier. Every release, it seems like we add more and more complexity, more and more challenges, more and more architectural decisions for you to make. And so that is why we suck at our jobs. But there's hope.
There's hope.
And we want to talk you through the right way of doing this. So just to show of hands, who here is an Office 365 customer already? Awesome. And who's an Office 365 partner or reseller or something like that? Okay, a few of them as well. All right, well, congratulations. You're in Office 365, and you're attending a planning session about Office 365. So I assume you haven't got very far yet. Who has deployed Office 365? Show of hands. Okay. Who would say they haven't fully deployed Office 365? Everyone. Yep. Yeah. And that's generally the problem. And I like this clip art here because this guy is, this is a standard Microsoft clip art you might see on the side of a bus or something like that. But he just looks utterly confused. Plaid shirt, a purple shirt, plaid jacket. And this is kind of how it feels sometimes when you're starting your Office 365 deployment. And really any deployment, there's sort of this challenge. And this is kind of my 2-minute slide art. But it's a challenge. You're moving from a current state to a future state. No matter what deployment you're doing this sort of this transition, right, from current state to future state. And that state of transition adds additional complexity, right? There's a phase there where you're running in both. You're running in the current state, you're running in the future state, you've got overlap, you've got users on one, users on the other, and you're trying to manage all that. You're essentially duplicating the amount of work you do. And we've been dealing with that in IT for quite some time. We're used to that. But the other thing that we also kind of sometimes fail to realize is we're also introducing this change state as well. And this change state generally throws everything out. You know, people will tell you to embrace change is great. As IT professionals, we know that's not the case. We know change is hard, change is painful, change causes support calls. But we also know we can't avoid it or we'll be out of a job. So we kind of have this love-hate relationship with change. It keeps us employed, but it makes our lives hard. So when you're trying to change the current state, you have to overcome this natural aversion to risk. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, why change anything? The system is running right now, and you're trying to make a change to something, whether it's a group policy, changing something in your Active Directory, running some sort of cleanup script that has the potential of deleting important data. There's a whole lot of risk with just changing the current state. And then, of course, changing to a future state, all of a sudden you're retooling your people and your processes. You know, the technology we can handle, but it's this retraining, retooling, refactoring how we do some, pretty standard business processes that we've been following for, sometimes 20 years of how we manage certain things, how we onboard new users, how we provision mailboxes, how we handle support, how we handle patching. All those sorts of things are kind of ingrained to us, and we have to change those sorts of things. So this is really the kind of trifecta of issues that I think make deployment really hard. So the key point for Office 365 that I want to leave you with is that it's great to be innovative with how you use Office 365. We see a lot of different customers do some really amazing things with Office 365, baffling sometimes, but don't innovate with how you do deployment. Play it very safe. Follow our extremely prescriptive guidance on how to do deployment, and together we'll get through it. It's not going to be fun, but at least hopefully we can make it less painful. It's change. We're introducing change. Let's not pretend that this is something that is going to come very easy. At the end of it, we may be able to delight people with the end result. Absolutely fantastic. But we know that there's work involved when we're doing that change. So, Fast Track. Fast Track is essentially our best practice for Office 365 deployment. This is something we've been working on for, about 3 years now. The latest iteration, since September 1st, we've actually backed up this process with actual Microsoft people to assist you doing these steps as well. What we're going to be focusing on a lot this session is this getting started experience, a getting started approach of how you should kick off your project with the right way, make the right decisions early on to make a really successful deployment. And the two areas we're going to focus on is really making sure you're successful in your trial and making sure you're successful with your plan as well. Once you've had a great getting started experience, once you've decided to purchase Office 365, to go forward with Office 365 and roll it out, then we have a new tool called the Office 365 Onboarding Center. And a little secret here, the Office 365 Onboarding Center is made up of people. It's Microsoft engineers that are here to help you drive through that deployment experience. So we'll take you through a very prescriptive approach around assessing your environment, remediating your environment, enabling your environment, and migrating your environment. There should be no reason for you to have to call Microsoft support. You'll have a proactive, named contact at Microsoft in our engineering team to help guide you through this deployment experience. And that's a really important thing. When we started out with Office 365, one of the really interesting lessons we learned early on was that building software is very different from running a service. Software is something you build. A service is something you do. You do it every day. It's not necessarily a point in time. It's not check the code in, make a gold master, ship it, and forget about it for 3 years until we need to make another one. It's something that has to keep up and running every day. All of our engineers now in the Office group are working on Office 365. Office 365 is now the mainstream. And with the mainstream comes a whole lot of different challenges. Right? We don't really have people building features for specific products anymore. We have people building service experiences. And these service experiences mean that if that engineer gets it wrong, they get woken up at 3 a.m. in the morning to try and fix it. This is a live service, constantly up to date. And so, likewise with deployment. We have deployment features. When deployment is hard, the deployment engineering team has to feel that pain. It's a kind of a delicate balance. They're there to help you. The other thing is that they're not consultants and they're not partners. They're not there to try and sell you something at all. They're just there to try and get you through their tools, their process, their software as fast as possible, so that if you do have problems, we can wake up the other engineer that's responsible for Exchange or SharePoint. And then finally, the end state, the state that you want to spend most of your time is around driving the usage of the tools. Right? The business case that you built was not necessarily about deployment. No business case stands up for deployment. It's like getting married because you can get a great deal on the wedding. People want to use the stuff. And so where we want you to focus and where we want you to build expertise in is not so much deployment. Deployment you'll do once, and then you'll never do it again. Usage is what you'll be doing every day. That's your run state experience. And so we have tools and resources to help you there as well. But again, that's kind of a high-level view of the framework. We have a bunch of sessions that will cover all of this left-to-right view throughout the week. But really, we're focusing on getting started today. Clicked it wrong. So a couple of things. Why use Fast Track? Essentially, on average, organizations that are using this Fast Track approach have a 50% shorter deployment time, have 65% increased user uptake, and have an 87% decrease in support calls. We love that. That's the biggest thing. I mean, if anyone has a great experience with having to call support, let me know. Generally, if you have to call support, something's already gone horribly, horribly wrong. You can't fix it yourself. Our documentation has failed you. Our tools have failed you. Our software has failed you. And that's a problem already. And the poor person on the end of that support call has to try and turn that around. And so, this, and in many ways, of course, it would be 87% decrease in support calls because now we're calling you first. We're guiding you through that process. And so you're already on the phone. You already have a contact. You can escalate straight to the engineer doing the work. You don't have to worry about tier 1 and tier 2 escalation queues and all those sorts of things that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. I clicked it wrong again. There we go. All right, so getting started. We used to call this proof of concept. We used to call this pilot. We used to call it a bunch of different things. But they are all loaded terms in IT land. Right? the loaded terms and the fact that when we've done proof of concepts in the past, they were expensive. We had to buy sometimes $10,000 worth of hardware. I was involved in a Lync deployment where it was actually 10 servers for the proof of concept. And that's a huge expense, that's a huge outlay. And in Office 365, the nice thing is the servers are already there. The capacity is already there. We're running it, we're built, literally hundreds of thousands of servers already running, just waiting for you to use it. And so when we think about this experience in Office 365, we don't want you to have to pay any money, invest any time, or touch any of that current environment and affect that current environment in that getting started experience. We want you to experience Office 365 without any of that first to help build that business case, build that plan, so that you can go forward, and when you're ready, you already understand how Office 365 works and how the key things are. So I talked a lot about strategy, so let's get with some technical guidance first. Who's created an Office 365 trial before? Anyone? Okay. So you all know this. When you fill it out, we ask you for this default domain. Create your user ID, and you're entering in essentially a .onmicrosoft.com. There's a nice little pop-up message there that doesn't really tell you that you cannot change this, your users will see this, and you cannot remove this. So we call this the default domain, or in Microsoft speak, we call it the ModRD, the Microsoft Online Direct Routing Domain. This is essentially your own private key for all of your different commercial services that you'll use across Microsoft. So when you provision an Azure tenant, it will be contoso.onmicrosoft.com. When you add in Office 365, contoso.onmicrosoft.com. All of your users essentially will have that mail routing ID if you're using Exchange. Your SharePoint site will be at contoso.sharepoint.com. Your OneDrive site will be at contoso-my.sharepoint.com, redirected from contoso.onedrive.com. And essentially, these things are all there throughout it. So you can't change it. You can't remove it. If you want to start a trial or you want to get started in the right way, you should get started the way you intend to finish it with the right name straight up. Beware of the default domain. Yes, that pop-up tells you nothing about that. But now you all know, you've been warned. What is the workaround? When we can't solve it in technology, we solve it in process. And so our best workaround for you right now is to get someone to sign for it. Get approval from your project sponsor. This is an important decision. Go in with eyes wide open. Make sure that someone signs off on it, whether that's your project champion, your CIO. You can put it in your project documentation and make that decision really early. We know this is an issue. We're working on it. It's actually kind of a big challenge across multiple Microsoft products is how that all works out. So it's probably a change that will take many months/years to solve. So right now, make that decision, eyes wide open, get someone else to sign off on it as well. So let's get into the trial. Jeff, do you want to take us through
Absolutely.
What you can do in a trial?
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Alistair said, the importance of this is that we don't want throwaway work. We don't want anyone to throw away their work. And so when you start with a domain that's a throwaway, we know that that customer will have to then do all of the work necessary to get a new domain, to move forward. So the entire intention of kind of the fast track methodology or framework is that you're going to start with something that you're going to continue to move forward with. And so it's a small piece of that at the front end, but it really helps when you're moving forward and go into production. So, and that's why we're talking about try before you buy. And what else I'll say is, if you've already purchased, if you have licenses, we don't call it a trial, we don't call it a pilot, because it truly is getting started. And a customer can get started with Office 365 no matter where you are. If it's something you haven't purchased yet, if it's something that the licenses were signed 2 years ago, everyone can get started with the service. And so that's a key difference when we talk about what a pilot or a proof of concept might be. Getting started is simply starting with the service, no matter where you are in the process. So we do have a trial, and we do have an easy way to get started if you've never done Office 365. But all the hands here in the room, most of you already have tenants. You already have what you're doing. So what we really wanted to do was push a set of tools, resources, content, whether it's in a new tenant, whether it's in a tenant you're currently using. And we want to basically allow you, inside your Office 365 experience, to have a better way of doing this framework. More content directly in SharePoint, more videos, more helpful files, more labs built in the entire experience. So think of this as kind of the deployment team's curated. We've taken everything that might be crazy on the web and tried to put it into a spot that you can really use. So from an IT pro, we try to break it out and say, end users, we know they need these things. And IT pros always ask us, where's our training? Where's our documentation? How do I reach out to users? When do I start my communication plan? So we try to really fit in some of the content to IT pro and then give you the ability to use the end user content as you go. And so when we think of getting started, we think about it in these kind of 4 main buckets. Build the vision, include training for IT pro, training for end user. We want you to have labs. If you're fighting a hybrid environment, you know this is coming up, we want to give you a hybrid lab, and we want to allow you to then tweak it around with no effect on any of your own services, any of your own infrastructure. Like Alistair said, this is all happening in the cloud, not yet touching your infrastructure. And then from a tools perspective, what do you need to get ready? Was there anyone in here that was in the onboarding center session just previously? A few of you. We have the onboarding center. They have tools and process. Our intention is to get you flowing directly into those tools and process. So you'll see that as part of a big bucket. So what does the vision look like from the perspective of what you can do with getting started? Well, we have success.office.com. It is what our usage and adoption team puts all their heart and soul into as far as business scenarios, what you should be doing to really change the way you work. And so we take that content that's publicly on the web and we simply put it into SharePoint Online, your own tenant, to help you work from some of these scenarios. And I call it just a model home analogy. Give you a little bit of idea. For a lot of customers with a big SharePoint implementation where it's a line of business app, you might be very focused on those specific parts of SharePoint, but you've never actually used it for some really quick and easy site collections and people doing their work in a new way. SharePoint Online can be that line of business app. What we try to do is show you it can do all these things together with Skype, with OneDrive, with SharePoint Online, with Exchange, all integrated. And so we give you some of these experiences directly. Training. We want you to land in a spot that helps you as an IT pro to deliver the best possible experience. So it's an environment for you to come in, manage your experience, manage what scenarios you'd like to give to other business groups, manage the training that you want to deliver to your end users. From an end user perspective, we have broken this down into kind of business scenarios. Get it done from anywhere, email and calendars on the go. And each one of these things, and you're just seeing a screenshot, and I'm going to go through a demo, but each one of these we see as a complete kind of scenario where we want to deliver a guide, a video, and then a bunch of resources so that people within your organization can see email and calendar on the go. How do I do that? Where do I go? What are some of the tools I use? And then we package that into a scenario and then give it to you to allow IT to push that out as a new way of doing work in a getting started environment. And we also work with Brainstorm. Brainstorm is a training organization. We work with training organizations all over the world, but we've worked with Brainstorm to include their quick help as part of these getting started experiences. So if you want to have digital content, quick help guides, it really is the Brainstorm Learning Center, and that is just part of the experience. And I'll show you where you would choose that and how you would kind of walk through there. But that's, training is huge. We have a ton of great training on Office.com. We have a ton of great training in our learning centers, but we wanted to highlight some of the experiences we've had with Brainstorm and then allow our customers to engage with that. Next in the bucket was labs. All of these are labs. You can choose to host it in your own Azure. If you have MSDN, if you have your own Azure account, that's your choice. We also have a Microsoft hosted solution, so you can click the button, and for 72 hours, we'll host these labs for you. And we do that at conferences, deployment days, all across the board, but this is for all of our customers who are going through getting started. If you want to take a deeper look at ADFS, totally in a cloud environment, we'll provision a completely different test system. You'll never have to go into it. Be able to work through all the various steps for each one of these scenarios.
This has been a labor of love for us for quite a long time. We used to give out DVD packs of 8 different DVDs with all these different labs on them. It would take you about a week just to copy them over, unzip them, rehydrate them, and then find a server that had 64 gig of RAM to run them all up. And so now you just be able to click them, and in a couple of minutes have them provision in Azure has been huge. A lot of people are really taking advantage of this.
And then we're tools. So we went vision into the training, into labs, and into tools. And some of our tools are built into Office 365. And so things like the health and readiness checks, they're in product. And sometimes they're not the most visible of things that you might not have ever found. So we try to highlight those from our team and say, this is something you can and should do. And what I'm showing you here is it's in the admin app. You walk through setup. There's tools and resources that'll basically, from your PC, go into Active Directory, into Exchange, and give you your list of remediation steps. And from a perspective of planning, these are the tools and these are the resources our onboarding center use. They will do this for every single customer to make sure we're getting them on board and that there's a remediation in place. What we like to see is our customers kind of moving through these during getting started, so that when it comes to the deployment, when it comes to the true implementation, you're already moving forward.
Yeah,
and they're simple kind of tools that are just, from an IT perspective, they'll give you a hint at what you might need to do with the onboarding center. An ID fix, and I'll do a little demo of this right now. ID fix is basically, you can run this anytime against your Active Directory and see how cloud ready it is. And it's just a very simple tool. You run against your AD, it'll tell you if you were to DirSync an AD to the cloud, here's the issues you're going to see. And these, onboarding center will work this with you. Your partner could work this with you if you actually need to do a ton of remediation. But these tools can be used in the getting started phase to just get a view of what's, how are we going to plan for this? What is it that we need to change in our environment? So we'll just jump into a demonstration now. Hold on while I bring it over. All right, you can see that. So like I talked about, we land you in this spot as IT. This is in your product. This is in your Office 365 environment. I have a tenant, Ignite FT, that I simply kicked through this process, and it landed me here. You see really quickly you have getting started for IT. This is where our migration team, who do mailbox migrations for our customers, land their content. So if you're going to move through an onboarding center engagement and do all your mail migration, you'll actually work with that team directly through getting started site. Onboarding details, tasks, and kind of project plan tasks that are included, and then management. And we just try to make it easy as far as do it yourself. We've put a ton of investment into click-throughs, labs, all of these tools. And so we land it all right in here. So you can just choose from an IT pro side what you'd like to do. We land an app in the environment. SharePoint Catalog app. It lands here. You authenticate it into directly through your SharePoint site. And these are the scenarios I talked about, the kind of model home. You'll see that getting started and getting started for IT are landed. I could add finance and accounting at any time. And again, it's just model home. What do we think a finance and accounting team would do? What are our best work scenarios across all Office 365 for these teams? And you can see I didn't choose IT or legal, but I chose R&D and productions. And this is up to you. This comes with none chosen out of the box, and you can land these as you'd like to. And this is also where you can do Brainstorm Training Hub. You simply click the button, provisions in the back end, and you now have the Training Hub available to you. And then one of our kind of steps forward we've taken with some other product teams, project and portfolio management. This will actually create a project trial, attach it to your tenant, and then allow you to use Project Online. And it also puts in kind of the onboarding tasks into a project plan for you. So that's one of the kind of deeper scenarios for IT that you actually will, it will actually put a trial into your tenant and allow you to move forward with Project Online. So what does that all look like when it hits the tenant? So all the pieces that I chose, these are the familiar pieces that I showed you. All of these are coming really from the success.office.com, where we land all of this information kind of in one place as we go. Emails and calendar on the go, store sync and share your files. These are all visible from end user perspective, so you could simply set up your end user audience, send them directly to here. We do everything in the site/fast track site collection. So it doesn't touch anything else within your environment. You can choose what to do with it. But what we feel like is, you have a learning path. Your end users can go out to this documentation. They then have ongoing learning, service update information. And for you, countdown template and awareness, you can use this email template, send it out to your users. It's already pre-formatted and looks just like the content. Question really quick? No, this is for everyone. We'll show you at the end.
Yeah.
All of this is for every customer everywhere. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. The question was, is this for people 150 and above or everyone? This is for everyone. And I'll show you the link at the end to go to, then you can do it. And that's how we get started with end users. And I just wanted to cut through a couple of these scenarios. These are the ones I chose to implement, and I have them up here. Couple other things, let's just back up for a second for training. Our office.com team, our content publishing, do an amazing job publishing content. Sometimes I have a hard time finding that content, have to go around TechNet. So we've taken the top downloads, the top office.com downloads, and one of them is making the switch. And each one of these is a course, guided scenario, video, because this is the top asked question. How do we make the switch from a client perspective? And so these are all of our integrations with our content publishing team. These are all publicly available somewhere on office.com. We try to load them into the tenant and allow you to then manage through it. And then from the scenarios, we also have some video learning, so you can kind of choose. And this doesn't host videos in your tenant. This is all coming from a secure Azure storage, so that you're not utilizing your storage scenarios. But it's basically, we have an integration with the Office.com team. Anytime videos get put up on Office.com, we simply land them here based on that information. So it's just a single place to go within your own tenant. And then to go through a couple of these scenarios, R&D and production. This is what we've envisioned for our customers to use some of these scenarios. You can watch the guide. You then have the how-to, and each one of these videos kind of go along with the storyline. So it shows you what's possible, shows you the videos of what you can use, and then down below you actually have SharePoint web parts build-outs to show you the features that we were talking about. So R&D and production is all about workflow. It's all about planning. And so then you have a very specific Visio insert that shows, here's what a sample workflow looks like. Here's what a sample look like for doing your pipeline or change of process. And each one of those can go into, we're in the sales and marketing. What does a sales and marketer do? And I have a pretty big banner here, but I can always just get rid of that. And I'm in the page. I'm working through it. They're just examples, trying to show pipeline, some of the Power BI. And so this is the only point where it's like, yeah, there's a little bit of this kind of example data, but most of it is just to try to give you a framework of which way to go with the product. And if you're not using it in this way, hopefully it's very helpful. If you're already very mature from the perspective of using these products together, then it can be a resource. It's just up to you. And then just to finish it off, from a Brainstorm Learning Center perspective, this goes into Quick Help, and it'll launch now, which is another catalog app, full app. It's loading everything, and this is Office, Windows, everything. When you think of being able to curate your own playlists, being able to curate your own content from a pretty massive library, we basically give you 90 days, 250 seats of this to then work through and see if it's meaningful for you. So it's just a part of our customers ask us every day, how do we get training? How do we land this training? And we thought, well, we'll do one of these pieces and really see how it goes for our customers. So it's basically everything, and all the videos you can see there. And so that is the getting started kind of content and what we think is helpful within an Office 365 tenant for our customers. So this all happens in your world. You control it as you wish, and you can land it with your own business groups, totally on you. We allow you to provision it in no matter how large you are, and then it's just yours to use. And it's our own just way of saying we feel like our customers are really benefiting from this right now. In the onboarding center, if a customer comes into the onboarding center and has no idea what to do, asks for training, asks what are my next steps, this is the resource that they also use to help our customers in the onboarding center in that very first kind of initiate and assess phase. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit more about a little deeper level of the application and its labs. And I'll show you in the readiness, and hopefully it doesn't time out here. In the app, we have deployment planning, reporting, readiness. And readiness is how we jump into labs. And labs are all, again provided for you. And it might have timed out on this. And you can choose them very easily. And what does a lab look like? Well, I'm into a lab. I chose it, hit go. It provisioned into Azure. I chose Microsoft to host that because I didn't have an MSD in. And what happens is you come into an HTML page that then allows you to remote into your lab. And this is a pretty simple lab. It's deploying with ADFS. Why wouldn't that be simple? I have my client, I have my domain controller, all of the roles are baked into there, and I have a step-by-step on the right-hand side. You know, we liken this to take TechNet, all the steps you would do. You know, I used to print it out and put it down next to my machine, go through all of my steps and check them off. That's what this is. It's a step checker. Except what this does is every single step of the process, it will check that you did it right, let you know what you need to do next. So it's built in and it's baked into the demo or to the lab program, implementing ADF sign-on with Office, and I can simply go through all of the pieces that I would go through. Right here I have IDFix up on the table or on the desktop, but it tells me exactly where to log in. Again, this is fully test tenant. You never have to worry about this one. We provisioned it for you. We did everything for you. You don't even get to choose the name because it's just for you to test, and we tell you all the credentials and everything up here on the right. So it's just there for that total dev test, and you can walk through each of these steps, and it will then, it's like going back into the system, seeing if I actually did all these things, and it should now fail. And to just go into a little bit in depth, what do we want you to plan? Well, very simply, I have what's called IDFix up here. Alistair and I, before the session started, went in and corrupted a few of the Active Directory people.
We're good at that.
Yeah, we're good at that. You know, we went into Amy Alberts and Julian, and basically what we did is we put an invalid character behind it. And there's a lot of things that go on in Active Directory. And one of the things our customers kind of struggle with is, does my Active Directory fit with the cloud? Because more than likely, you're going to do a directory sync. And when you do a directory sync, you're going to have a log file that says, all of this failed. And so IDFix is very simple. It's there to say, before I do that, give me the big ticket items that I need to go do. So we just simply went and messed up something that we know Azure Active Directory will not allow. And as soon as we saved it, you just simply run the query. It shows the two people who we went and messed up, and it could show hundreds or thousands. And then you have your action. And you can choose to edit, and it actually will do it for you. And you can go through, and it will edit everyone and their information to what you need. Obviously, that's scary, and that, you know, someone would call you and say, how come I can't log in or can't do this with an Active Directory? But you can do that very quickly from an edit. You then simply move. I'm going to apply that. Are you sure you want to do this? Yeah, absolutely. And it's complete. And what it also did is it gave me a backup so that I can always export, import, and any changes I made to my Active Directory through this, I can put them right back at any time. Just a quick and easy tool to say, while you're getting started, do a lab. Do IDFix. Get a feel for it. It'll help you in your planning and engagement to try to really think about, okay, do we need to do an Active Directory remediation? Is it truly something that is business affecting if we do this. So it's just a quick thing that I wanted to show as we work through that. And I'll go back to my... And just as a piece of information, these are all the people that I'm doing getting started with within my organization. And I started a lab, but I did not complete it. Just a quick highlight that says, hey, if you're doing labs, we track you through the labs. And when I say we, it's you. You track your own people through the labs. You can see if they've done it. You can see how proficiently they did it. And it's just something that we've seen IT teams be able to do those labs very quickly and then track who's done them within your own IT team. So it's just a great, quick experience from that perspective. And I think I'm heading it back to Alistair now. 1 second. Usually I go way over time, so I think I'm good.
That's right.
I've been known. So now that you've planned, you have all this content, you have everything that you're kind of setting up those business goals and that vision, then you're moving to onboarding, actually moving forward, deploying the workloads you want to workload, the purchase is made, you're now kind of going through the progress. So we're going to talk about a little more what happens in the onboarding center. Going to see a quick video I'll let Alistair introduce, and then we'll kind of come back to the actual planning tools side of what we do. So go for it.
Great. Yep. So this is an actual video of our onboarding engineers that we recorded earlier in the year. Kind of talk you through the process of how onboarding works.
Welcome to Office 365. By now, you've gone through the Getting Started tools and resources and created your deployment plan with the assistance of your Microsoft representatives or preferred partner. This means you're ready to begin onboarding your users. Here's how it works. Within 30 days of acquiring your Office 365 licenses, a Microsoft onboarding expert will contact you to help with the onboarding process, starting with a kickoff meeting. During the kickoff meeting, your Microsoft onboarding team will talk with your project team about deployment. First, we'll discuss the roles and responsibilities of your team and Microsoft. Then we'll take a look at the services you want to onboard and the requirements for each of them. Next, we'll walk you through your deployment plan so you know exactly what to expect. And finally, we'll discuss the level of assistance you'd like from Microsoft. To get you up and running on Office 365 as quickly as possible, we'll also use the kickoff meeting to create an onboarding plan. We'll work with your team to build an onboarding timeline, confirm remediation timelines, and plan for any optional support you may need. Together, we'll use this onboarding plan to stay on track for an easy, seamless deployment. Once you've initiated onboarding and had the kickoff meeting, it's time to begin assessing your infrastructure.
Yeah, just a little joke there. We built that one for our sales team. They don't read a lot of our documentation. They really respond well to comics and cartoons. We also have another comic book up here as well. We're giving it out at the booth. That's an 8-page comic book as well, so it's very useful if you need to explain it to your CIO or IT manager. Really recommend that you take one of those. So, but more seriously though, that's not the bare minimum documentation you need. What we've seen in a lot of Office 365 deployments is we've kind of generalized it down to these are the 3 big ticket items. If you have these 3 documents, or these 3 artifacts, if you like, you're going to have a successful deployment experience. The adoption plan. An adoption plan is essentially your launch plan. This outlines all the things that you'll do with your users, your user readiness activities, and also how you'll measure the success of those user activities. There was a business case. That business case outlined why you were doing this change. It outlined the expected benefits you were going to get. It outlined the stakeholders, outlined the budget. The adoption plan essentially outlines the measurement framework of how you're going to measure success on those user-focused areas. And the technical side is the deployment plan. That's your technical objectives, outlines your project scope, deployment timelines, your current infrastructure, your end state, the expected remediation activities that you're going to have as well. So those are the kind of big 3 items. Now, many of you have already got Office 365. Who was involved in the decision to buy Office 365? Anyone show hands? A lot less people that are on it. So what I would say to that is find out the business case. There was probably a business case done. Someone signed off on it. Someone signed the check. find out who that was. We're not here to tell you how to build a business case. That's really very organization specific. Some of you are doing Office 365 for cost-saving reasons. Some of you are looking for new features and all those sorts of things. There's so many different ways to do a business case, and it really is up to you to target how your executives or stakeholders will respond best. I have some examples, though, and these are all serious examples, and it just highlights how different, like, in many shapes and sizes, the deployment plan of business cases come in. The first one is a case study. The case study for this one is the Cat Association of the UK, who are about building an extranet for cats. Not users, but it was for cats. They do a lot of cat preservation activities and those sorts of things. And a lot of these business cases, they have very specific needs. And when you're an organization like that, doesn't have an office, volunteer-led, Office 365 extranets are perfect for that sort of scenario. They don't have to worry about so much less. The next one isn't an Office 365 example, but I think this is a really interesting one as well. This is Lowe's. Lowe's is a hardware chain. They have an innovation lab where they play around with robotics and virtual reality, which is kind of weird. But what they do when they build some of these things, they build their business case in the form of a comic book. They build a comic book, and what they find is that it's much easier to get the vision across when they represent it that way, rather than a TCO, ROI calculation, and those sorts of things. They're all important, but a business case should land the value, the vision, and what the expected environment will look like. And so they find that comic books are useful. And then the final example, we see a lot of business cases, and these get the, let's call them the express business case, is crisis management. That's a nice picture of a beautiful old building there in Donetsk in the Ukraine. This is a customer we talked about earlier in our session as well. This customer found themselves in the middle of some geopolitical issues, and they had to migrate very quickly. We've seen that a lot as well. That's kind of the hardest examples. I saw this back in Australia. I'm from Australia, and one of our cities flooded, and we were talking about Office 365 or at BPOS at the time for about 3 years leading up to it, and concerned about security. Then the banks of the river broke after particularly heavy rain, and the city council's data centers flooded. And so in a very short amount of time, in a crisis like that, new business case, keep the lights on, get everything out, and we'll worry about the security later. So that's just some examples of business cases come in many shapes and sizes. Deployment plans, though, are prescriptive. Deployment plan is your technical objectives, and going back to what I said earlier, we want you to follow a prescriptive approach to deployment plans. Use all your creativity on the business case, that's great. Deployment plans, you've got to get down to brass tacks really quickly. This is a guided planning tool. Your entire team should take part in this tool. We've built a template to automate the sorts of questions and the sorts of decision points you need to make throughout that deployment plan. And I'll show you that right now. Oh, that's the wrong button.
Just go like this.
Two people using a touchscreen, always bad. There we go. All right, so this is the deployment plan. It's back in that Fast Track Management app that will deploy into your own SharePoint Online environment. If you want to get this app, you go to deploy.office.com/getting started. But essentially what we have here in the deployment plan section is a bunch of different, essentially wizards and workflows. So essentially what you will do is you'll go through this. You kind of outline your business strategy. This generally comes from your business case. Your business case will have had what you want to get out of it. We've loaded some prereqs here, like enable mobile productivity, simplify document management. Let's choose that one. And of course, reduce storage costs. So each business case has kind of a description, category, and a name. So we'll go through this tool. We'll outline who our project team is. And here are the sorts of people that we generally like to capture in this deployment plan. The project owner is really the only mandatory one here. We pre-populate you with all these others, though, as well.
And while he's typing that, the key, couple of the key pieces is this deployment plan is for you, but it's also shareable with the onboarding center. So if you're working with a partner, if you're working just yourselves, but as you move into deployment with the onboarding center, this is something that they will do during the assess phase with you. And so, these key contacts, your partner's key contacts, it makes it very easy for the onboarding center to engage quickly and with the right people. So just keeping that in note that absolutely this is built for our customers, but it's a huge part of your kind of flow in the initiate phase with our onboarding center.
Right. So as you do a deployment plan, like this project owner here, this is the person that the onboarding center will call as you go into those deployment phases. If you don't have this, we have a fairly complicated workflow to work out who to call. Generally ends with the person that signs the check. And so that's not always the person that's going to do the deployment, right? So do this deployment plan, get the right people involved. Made a mistake. Oh, typing too fast. Data validation, guys, it's a wonderful thing. Workload details. And here what we really focused on is getting away from the product talk. Exchange does email, yes. Office does Office. Online meetings, social networking, all these sorts of things. In Office 365, the lines are blurring very quickly between what is SharePoint, what is Delve, what is Exchange, and all those sorts of things. And so it's actually not very valuable anymore to think about those particular products unless you're migrating from them and those sorts of things. So I'm just going to choose some easy ones here. I'll call this user segment attendees. We'll say there's 250 attendees. And we have one user already in Office 365. And the reason we're asking for existing users is because this deployment plan, we expect you guys to iterate on that deployment plan throughout the deployment project. I haven't seen a single deployment plan that hasn't changed from start to end of these projects. Generally, we're going to chew through them pretty fast. One particular customer I was working with had a different deployment plan every 3 weeks. Something changed. It's an 18-month period of so many different deployment plans that they created. And then, of course, the timeline. And these are the key phases of that deployment plan that we're looking at here. Just for the ease of this demo, I'm going to simplify it down, and I'm just going to fill in start date, tomorrow, an end date. Let's make it, let's give ourselves 3 weeks. Save that. Oh, sorry, did that wrong.
No, you're good.
Save that. And I'll just delete these ones here. Simplify it down. Project risks. We like to include the risk register in this deployment plan. Risks and issues are two different things, right? Risks are things we're worried about. Issues are things we have. And so we've got some default risks here. Change in scope. Anyone have that risk? All right. Schedule slip. Anyone? So that's just two default ones here as well. So fill those in. And essentially going through this wizard, this is fairly high-level stuff that we're capturing at this point in the deployment plan. But what you'll see as we go forward, as we've completed this first section, is because based on what I've chosen, you see another section now appear down here. You see the Exchange Online section appear because I've said that yes, we want to do Exchange Online. So if I go into these sections now, what I'm going to have is a bunch of different questions. So plan overview, current environment, identity, they're the core ones here as well. As we get into Exchange, we have a bunch of more technical questions. Is there a requirement for bulk email messages, email notifications? Yes. Mailbox is hidden from the address book? No. Is there a requirement to use SMIME? Yes. Essentially, I'm going through completing these questions, and these all become part of my deployment plan. So it's a very easy Q&A, essentially, approach. Your whole team can collaborate on this, so you can have different people do different sections. It may take you, an hour to do this by yourself if you're the sole IT guy and you know everything about your entire environment. Or if you have a larger team, distributed team, sometimes it can take 3 weeks to track down the guy that owns the DNS setting changes and all those sorts of things as well. So I'll clear out of this. And basically the output of all this, this is a great tool for entering all the information. If I jump back to deployment plan, what we can do once we've filled out this, at any time, we can essentially create a snapshot of all of this content. So I'm going to create a snapshot. As you see one here, we create the initial snapshot as soon as you do that plan overview. And what this snapshot is it's an automated Word document we've generated. So we know you guys aren't power users of Office. Generally, Office is a weird thing in that most of the time our users know more about the product than we do in IT. So it's kind of a strange process we're in. So what we do with this document is we help you automate that deployment plan, and we're filling that deployment plan with a whole bunch of content here. We're building this in Word for good reason. We build it in Word so you can change all the logos and make it look like your own work. Change the author, and pass this 40-page document off as your own hard work, and take the rest of the week off. So, so hopefully you like that. It seems like a lot of questions to go through that deployment plan, but the payoff is quite good. Also, you can fix some of our spelling mistakes as you go through this document. So that's essentially the deployment plan. We have a similar experience for adoption plan that takes you through those same things, except from an adoption plan perspective. Really powerful tool to go through these and just generate that deployment plan. In the background, what happens with that deployment plan is when the onboarding center engages with you, they'll be working from that same deployment plan with you. You'll have a shared experience. If you're working with a partner, they should be working from that same deployment plan as well. So you're all based on that same approach. And of course, it's going to change. It'll change over and over again. You'll see a history of all the changes here in the snapshots that you can go back and read. But it's just a nice way to guide you through the process. And if anyone asks, you can hand them a 40-page document and tell them to go away. Okay, so back to the planning tool. A couple other things in the planning tool as well. If you want help filling out that wizard, we have a bunch of different offerings available as well. If you're a software assurance customer, this is essentially enterprise agreements and those sorts of things. There is a benefit through Microsoft licensing called deployment planning services. And these deployment planning services, you can either use these to get a 3-day or a 10-day voucher, essentially for a Microsoft consultant or for a Microsoft partner to come on site with you and help go through these questions. Obviously, it doesn't take 3 or 10 days to fill out that wizard. There's more they can do, help you get it set up with the remediation tasks, help guide you through the labs, and essentially get you going to build all this as well. So this is called Deployment Planning Services. It's available exclusively through the Software Assurance Benefit Program. I don't know any more than that. The nice thing about this, though, is that the partners that do this program, if you're not a software assurance customer, they can also help you with the 3-day engagement as well. Oh, jump here. Oh, wrong slide. So a couple of things. We spend a lot of time analyzing a lot of those items as well. It's interesting when we see so many customers come through Office 365. And in Office 365, there's a whole lot of telemetry in the service. It helps inform product decisions when we know that it takes certain people a certain amount of time to do certain things as well. We also use these planning tools, the adoption planning tool and the deployment planning tool, to understand customer intentions as well. Customer intentions are pretty important because then we can match them up with telemetry and we say, well, customers were thinking about doing this, but our Office 365 telemetry says they're doing that. So there's a disconnect, there's a product problem that we have to fix. And we like to share this information as well because I think this helps answer that question of, is my organization normal? Am I really worried about the right things? Am I worried about what everyone else is worried about? And this is essentially what everyone else is worried about with Office 365 deployments. The big surprise for us was most of the concerns are around a project base. Do I have the right staffing? Do I have the right executive prioritization? Is my timeline too aggressive? Do I have everything in scope? And do I even have the budget for it? Current infrastructure is a huge amount of a challenge. I'm not really sure about how my current infrastructure looks. And so these sorts of things have helped us prioritize over the years the sorts of features that we need to build, the sorts of tools we need to build to help you get up to speed with your current infrastructure really fast, to help you get up to speed with some of your project documentation, and those things really fast as well. The other thing that's kind of interesting that we're seeing right now as well is the environments that people are coming to Office 365 from. This changes over time. We're sort of now cresting essentially the early adopters. The early adopters have moved to Office 365, and now we're looking at these mainstream customers. Mainstream customers and users have a very different set of challenges. The early adopters sometimes love to put up with all of the crazy things and lack of documentation, tribal knowledge, and you have to go to the conference and meet the certain guy to find out the GPO policy you need to apply to get certain features to work. That's all great, and many of you here are in that room. But for everyone else, it's kind of hard to track down those sorts of things. And as we move into that mainstream set of customers, now we have hundreds of millions of users on the service. It's important for us to keep an eye on where they're coming from, what platforms are coming from as well. And this helps us prioritize the investments we need to make as well. Here you see, for instance, we're seeing a lot of customers coming from Exchange 2010 today. That's interesting. I mean, Exchange 2013, if you've made the decision to go to Exchange 2013, probably not going to immediately go back and make the decision to go to Office 365 if you're already on Exchange 2013. If you're on Exchange 2010 and you're looking at what that next upgrade looks like, are you planning on 2016? And what we're seeing now is that it looks like those 2010 customers are looking to move to Office 365. Gmail, a few customers, Lotus Notes, a few customers, still important customers as well. Current environment here, you see a lot of Office 2010, Active Directory 2008 R2 that we're seeing come through this. So sort of an N-1 world is what people are looking to come into Office 365 with as well. So to kind of wrap up on documentation, to go back to this chart, really the adoption plan is there to help you overcome that resistance to change from your end users, your users, the kind of business changes that will happen to that organization. The business case explains the intent, it will justify why you're going to make that change. The deployment plan outlines all the variables that you have and the approach that you'll take to get it done. So these are the three really important documents that you should have at the end of your planning experience as well. So, what happens next? A couple of things. Execute your plan. Follow the plan. You built a plan, stick to it. If you're not sticking to it, change the plan, and then stick to that. A very simple approach. Keep your plan up to date as you go through. Again, don't forget about your users. It's very easy to forget about your users when you're tied in with ID fix, changes and Active Directory remediation, putting in ADFS. But you should make sure that if you are doing the adoption piece, or if you have a business stakeholder that is driving the change management to end users, make sure you keep in sync with them and make sure you're pointing them to the right resources at success.office.com as well. Again, work with your Microsoft representatives. Within 30 days of purchase, an onboarding center will be assigned to every customer that has more than 150 seats. You can engage the onboarding team proactively at deploy.office.com/request onboarding. There's all sorts of weird and wonderful licensing scenarios where we may not necessarily see you within that first 30 days, depending on how you negotiate your contracts and how you shake hands and those sorts of things. And then follow the roadmap as well to keep up to date with what's going on with Office 365. The roadmap we publish, very often it's kind of connected to our engineering system, so every time we make a change, you'll see something appear in the roadmap. You can actually see as we have features in development, features that have been canceled, features that are shipping, rolling out, and then features that are completed to roll out as well. So it's a really useful resource. And so that is Fast Track. I think we're at the end of it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Cheers. So we have some comic books up the front. Feel free to take them or come down to the booth. And if you have any questions, feel free to approach the mics. We'll take questions for the next few minutes as well.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yep.
Hi, sure.
So this is all great. I compliment you guys on the amount of work done here, but it also seems to work really well if you're just going lock, stock, and barrel and doing all of Office 365,
Yeah.
what if you're deploying over several years? Like
Yeah.
right now, Exchange and Link stay on-prem, doing other pieces. Will this process work for
Yes.
that kind of piecemeal approach?
It
Yeah.
will, and I would say that's a big chunk of our customers going step by step.
Okay.
So it's not unheard of. And as we put together all this, it's kind of all inclusive, but we expect your scenario. We expect your situation, and when you work with the onboarding center or when you work through these tools, you can always choose your route, and you can always highlight what you're doing now and wait for the things later.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's the expected outcome from our perspective, is our customers take plenty of time, and then you're heavy into the change management. You're heavy into the world where people live in two different places doing different things.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, I had a question.
Yeah,
Will these slides be available?
yes.
And-
I think we've already uploaded them.
Oh, okay.
We're good presenters. We put it before the session.
So
yeah.
where are they?
Where are they?
Yeah.
They're on the Ignite site for
Just
this
go out
session.
there and-
Yep.
okay.
Yep. They're all sitting there. Yep. Any other questions in the big room? We'll take your questions down here, and
Yeah,
we'll turn off the
I had a-
microphones.
I had a
Oh,
question.
go ahead. You have one.
Yeah. You mentioned the domain is very important when you select that. We had a situation where somebody else did the work initially.
Yep.
And we're in a pilot state. So we're going to E3,
Yep.
and can we just start all over, I assume? That's what we have to do?
You can.
Okay.
You can. If there's work that went into another place,
Mm-hmm.
if that's salvageable, then try to salvage it. But if it's something you want to now go and move and do the right piece, then go for it.
So just start all over
Yeah.
then? Okay,
Yeah,
just ask for a new tenant.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. And I'll come down here and we can chat.